G.K. Chesterton, a British Catholic, an author and philosopher, once wrote that the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. Christianity, if you're doing it rightly, is indeed difficult. It is challenging, which has caused many to turn away and leave it untried. It has caused others to water it down, to dilute its expectations until it becomes palatable. On the other hand, there are men in our parish, among whom there are quite a few young teenage men, who have decided to participate in a Lenten and a pre-Lenten program called Exodus 90. It is a program in which the participants commit themselves to quite a few difficult disciplines, to a number of very hefty penitential practices. No TV, no movies, no social media, no video games, no unnecessary computer or internet use, no sweets or sweet drinks, no snacks, no alcohol, no eating meat on Wednesdays and Fridays. In fact, not much eating at all on those days because they are considered fast days. And what sounds to me like the worst of them all, no warm showers. Not for the 40 days of Lent, but for the 90 days from January 1st leading up to Easter. Now, I can imagine many men would see that list of no's and prohibitions and say, no, thank you. They would stop even before they started. Perhaps some others might begin with a hefty sense of zeal, but soon find themselves falling short. That confidence, that zeal to do it would soon beginning to fade away. What do we do when we encounter difficulties, when we encounter setbacks, perhaps even when we encounter failure? Do we give up and go away right from the get-go? Do we double down and try even harder? Chesterton offers us another quote. If a thing is worth doing, it is worth doing badly. He is not offering us justification or excuses for lackluster or poor efforts, but rather he's trying to help us understand poor results. In our first reading, we hear about the familiar 10 Commandments given to the Israelites as they are making their exodus from Egypt. This too can sound like a list of no's, a list of prohibitions, just one thou shalt not after another, increasingly restricting what we are allowed to do as we go down the list. Now, at first, this may seem fairly easy to live our lives in accord with these prescriptions. I mean, after all, there's probably not too many of you out there at risk of killing or committing adultery. However, though they seem easy on the surface, as you dig down and you begin to become aware of what these commandments actually entail, we see that they are quite difficult to keep. In fact, we were discussing some of the finer details at one of our adult faith formation classes. And one of the attendees, in a moment of exasperation, exclaimed, "If that's true, that's impossible. I would be sinning at every moment, falling into sin with each encounter with another person." Precisely. That men's program, Exodus 90, together with the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt, for which it's named, had two purposes. One purpose is freedom. Before God gives them any of the commandments, he identifies himself as the one who is leading them out of slavery. That list of no's is actually a list of yeses. Yeses to removing the last vestiges of enslavement to foreign powers. All those things that begin to creep into our lives, promising convenience or promising some sort of other comfort. And though they begin as possessions, they end up possessing us. The second purpose is failure. The law, the 10 Commandments, were given to the Israelites so that they would know their sinfulness. That list of prohibitions are given to the men in that Exodus 90 program so that they could know their weakness. Freedom and failure are not contradictory. They are not independent. They are not even separate realities. They are, in fact, sequential. First, failure, then and only then, freedom. One is the means, and the other is the end. So what do you do when you encounter difficulties, when you encounter setbacks, and perhaps even when you encounter failure? Do you give up and go away right from the get-go? Do you perhaps even fall back into a little bit of despair, despairing of any change, despairing of any chance of success? Do you double down, try even harder, perhaps experience some sense of success until you come across the next challenge, and then you have to double down again and again and again? But eventually you will reach your limit. Or is there a third option? To begin to become aware of our inabilities, and in becoming aware of our inabilities, perhaps even begin to embrace them, so that we turn to the one whose weakness is even stronger than our strength. We are now in the third week of Lent. This is the midway point in this season. And I know that after having talked to some of you, you still haven't really even begun. Maybe you're still wrestling with how you want to adopt these disciplines of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Perhaps you really never had the intention to begin at all. You just treat this season like any other season. Perhaps you began with a lot of fervor or a lot of zeal, but you have fallen short because of failures, or maybe you just simply forgot. Or maybe you're just doing the same thing that you've done every year, and you're just skating through. You're finding it rather easy. The Lent and the law are designed for failure. They are designed to point out our sinfulness and our weakness, and yet they don't provide any grace for us actually to overcome them. Yet Lent and the law find their fulfillment in love. It is God's love that is mercy and strength. But he can only pour in his merciful love to the extent that we recognize our sinfulness. He can only pour in his strengthening love to the extent that we recognize our weakness. Just like a cup, it can't be filled from without until it is emptied from within. And so it is that Jesus enters into the temples of our lives today. He wants to turn over those tables that have crept in, that promise all sorts of means that we think are going to bring us to happiness and to holiness. He wants to go in to cast out all those that are exchanging a real and lasting freedom for a failed and fleeting sense of self-sufficiency. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. Yes, it may hurt. It may leave us empty. Good, because it's only for a time. Christianity hasn't been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult. Yet if we try, even if we try badly and find ourselves failing, we will eventually find ourselves wanting to be filled up more and more by him.